Hey, folks, Zach Osterman here, IU Insider, Indianapolis Star. Mind your banners, the last Mind Your Banners of the 2025, now 2026 IU football season before the last game. Mike, it's literally the last one we could do, right? We could not push this any further than we have.
We could have done it before the game at the stadium tomorrow. We'll be there.
Well, but generally, I guess we could have gone
breakfast tomorrow at Hard Rock Stadium.
Breakfast. I'm not sure I'm getting to Hard Rock Stadium for breakfast tomorrow.
We are going to be there that early.
We might be. Tough to say. How you feeling?
I'm better than you.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm like looking 2 days into my future, so I'm not thrilled about it.
I think I just have a sinus infection. So
people that get people sick say that.
I get them all the time. But
I have a sinus infection. I'm just sneezing over everybody. And
this is great. This is great content. Yeah. In fairness, like between us, how many airports have we visited in the last 3 weeks?
I think all of them.
We've pretty much covered America's range of potential pathogens and viruses. Mark Hess says front row seats to the greatest sports story this century. It may well be. Indiana plays Miami on Monday night, as Mike mentioned, at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami Gardens. You can't see it from here. You can't see much of anything from my room right now because it is pouring rain in downtown Miami. It's going to clear up by tomorrow, but it will be a fair bit colder. I think they're talking about wind chills. Dare we say it, as low as 27 degrees. Mike, are you? Did you pack your coat?
I brought a hooded sweatshirt. That's all I.
So my wife works at Indiana, and they sent out, the Indiana's, I think it's like their risk management team or somebody sends out like a weather, updates just kind of like weekly. And they sent out one this week pointing out that it was going to be a little bit colder than normal for game day. And that apparently, and I've heard this before, and I've been told to be on lookout for it, if it goes below freezing, iguanas start falling out of trees in Miami. Yeah, because it is too cold for them to sit upright. And the thing, the email basically said, don't touch them, leave them alone. They're not dead. They're fine. They just need to warm back up again.
How many trees have you walked under on this trip? Zero?
That's the issue. Is she keeps asking me to look for this phenomenon. Number one, it hasn't been cold enough. Number two, haven't seen a ton of trees and even fewer iguanas. Now, maybe things will be different out in Miami Gardens.
Is this just a podcast about weather and wildlife? Are we going to get to any football-related issues?
Well, I did promise her if anyone got hit by falling iguanas during the game, I would let her know. So that's the first. That's the first
key in the Hard Rock Stadium.
That's the first key matchup we're looking for here. Is anyone affected by falling reptiles? Indiana, the hay is in the barn, at least from a media perspective. Mario Cristobal and Kurt Signetti conducted what for Signetti will be the third and final pregame next to the trophy and a helmet press conference this morning here at the JW Marriott Marquis in downtown Miami. Mike, listen, we'll talk about storylines, we'll talk about matchups and things. Let's just start with sort of the scene. We kind of beat Indiana fans down here. I've noticed a lot more of them in like the last 24 hours, maybe than the first 24 to 36 I was here, even just down in the lobby of the hotel a little while ago. There were quite a few IU fans there. I don't think Indiana, I think we can all recognize why Indiana is not going to get the lopsided sort of stadium advantage that it got in LA and in Atlanta. But I think we would both be surprised if there isn't a substantial amount of cream and crimson in the stadium on Monday night.
Yeah, I think people got to probably temper their expectations because we had 80 and then 90. Like, it's not going up. There's a base of corporate tickets that are sold that's somewhere around I think 12,000 or something like that. And then obviously the ticket prices I think were clearly a barrier of entry. They went down they touched under 3,000 sort of mid-late week, but now I think
I think the suggestion was when Miami officially released its allotment, and so there was kind of a brief surge of fresh tickets on the market,
and now there's nothing under 3,700. So I do think that's gonna between that and then travel, obviously I mean, those are costs. I mean, you can't get here less than $10,000 for a lot of people, I mean, which is wild. So, I still think that it will be probably closer to even than than one might expect for a home game, in a team's home stadium. But it's not going to be, because the players all talked about how the last two games have been home games, and that's not what this is going to be. But for either team, like, it won't be a home game for Miami either. And you're on mute because you were sneezing, and so there you go.
Indiana says over 50%. Do we think it's over 50%? I don't think so.
No, I think it'll be split, and like there will be just a large group of fans that are maybe neither, that are just rooting for a good game.
Yeah, I think the question will be a little bit. I mean, I know that there were some Indiana fans coming up with, creative ways around certain ticketing policies, and I think a few people figured out how to get into the Miami allotment and things. The question will be, you what?
Espionage,
exactly. I think the question will be, in those neutral seats, like, does anyone find a way to grab a hold of some of those? I think at worst it'll be 60-40 Miami, would be my guess. I think it will be close to 50-50 personally.
Yeah, but it's not 50-50 of the entire allotment of the stadium, because like again,
yeah,
I don't think all those corporate sponsor tickets are going. I mean, maybe some of them get sold, obviously, but I don't think they're all going to Indiana. Or it's just, I think it's gonna be tricky because I even if it's 50-50, but it's not the whole. I don't even know what the capacity for Hard Rock Stadium is.
I'll look it up while you talk.
Well, I was just gonna do it.
65,326.
Yeah, so like maybe it's like 25 of each fan base, or like 25 to 30 of each fan base, and then a large group that's just there for the game. So but like I said, noise probably won't be an issue for either side. That means, so I mean, it'll be more of a true like neutral site-ish game.
Yeah, a little bit like the Big Ten championship game, but not in a dome.
Not really, because I mean, I felt like that was packed. I mean, there was no fan that wasn't there for either of those teams. Like
no, I know, but that was also a dome too. So, yeah. And I know Hard Rock Stadium is like semi-enclosed, right? Like the field is open. I think the stands are covered, so maybe it'll hold noise a little bit better than like the Rose Bowl would. The other thing that struck me from this week, and I know I said this to you, and I think you kind of agreed or remarked on it in some way as well. And this maybe isn't that surprising, but Indiana does not seem that affected by all this. Like there is, I mean, like you would not know the difference between, certainly at very least, this team's demeanor ahead of the Big Ten championship game, ahead of the Rose Bowl, ahead of the Peach Bowl, ahead of this game. And I mean, obviously regular season games are something different. Big Ten games are something different, but I have not detected at any point or perceived any sense from Curt Cignetti, from the coaches we've gotten to talk to, from the players at Media Day, that they see this as any different to what this program has to any other game this program has been through. And I think that is probably encouraging to Indiana fans, because that is ultimately kind of like the superpower of this team, is the ability to compartmentalize and to make every game the same in their own mind, and to make every challenge the immediate concern and nothing else, essentially.
I thought the exception to that rule was actually the Big Ten title game. I thought the team's mood that week leading up to that game felt not nerves, I don't know, but just reserved, like they sensed that this was like a huge sort of pivot, moment. And the stakes, not that the stakes aren't high with each college football playoff game, but like that it would be the jumping off point for maybe like what has transpired, right? Like if you win that, you get the number one seed, you get a Big Ten title that the program hasn't had in decades. And so like, to me, that felt like if you were going to pick an outlier, that was the one. And then like, since then, it kind of kicked off with the Heisman, where it was just like, we can not breathe easy, but just like, I don't know, compartmentalize find the joy in the moment and still sort of get to work. And they've sort of done that each week. And Curt Cignetti's talked about how repetition sort of helps with that they've had this experience, basically 3 times in a row, kind of very similar setup with different breaks in between, but like the media responsibilities, the practice away from Indiana. And so you kind of get used to it. And it did feel like a team that sort of adjusted to the the cadence of the schedule, but then also kind of getting back to work, that they didn't have this lengthy break off that they had for the Rose Bowl the last couple of weeks, that was more of a regular season type cadence to things. And so, like you said, it didn't feel like they were uptight or anything, but I didn't get the sense, just walking around Miami's media day, that they felt that either. But, I think they're ready, and there's something to be said for, like, now this is it, right? The end is here. So, like, I mean, there is something to, I think, that part of it.
Yeah, our friend Fred Hevelon asked, how would you describe this experience differently to the Rose Bowl and the Peach Bowl? I mean, like, the biggest difference to me, because a lot of the structure has been the same. There was a little bit less media around the Peach Bowl. It was a little bit of a quicker turnaround. But, like, the biggest difference was, it's interesting you mentioned the Big Ten Championship game. I think I probably felt that more during the Rose Bowl than at any other point. And it was less the idea of them making the game bigger and more the idea of the anxiety at all that time off.
I thought that was completely projected onto the team by other people. Like, I
thought that was projected onto the game by Curt Cignetti. He was very annoyed. He was talking about how travel was affecting practice schedules.
No, because
yes. No, I'm sorry, you were wrong about this.
He did not say travel affected. He said he said it was in the idea of these games, bowl games and playoff games. Practice on sites are never good. It had nothing to do with the layoff. Had nothing to do with the layoff.
He was frustrated by not frustrated. Frustrated's not the right word.
It was the idea that, yes, it's on site. You're frustrated by the on site nature of
they were anxious after the layoff to get back into a rhythm. I think there was a decided difference to the Peach Bowl and to this game, to your point earlier, because it felt much more natural, because there was less layoff, there was less stuff between, there was less time. There was
by saying he gave them the time off.
Yeah,
like he could have not done that. And so, like, I don't think that I'm, like I said, I think the anxiety about, like, every team did lose as a higher seed with the bye, but, like, that was all sort of like, is every team going to fall to it? And, like, Indiana said, no, it doesn't matter. We're not bothered by it. Like, I just thought that was not a thing that was on display.
Yeah, I disagree. But I think but I do agree that these last two have been, there. I mean, Cignetti even said something at the Tarmac arrival Friday night where he said, like, we're getting ready to play on Saturday, and he's like, well, I guess it's Monday, but, like, in our minds it's Saturday because and Cristobal has said something similar as well to your point about Miami. It's not like Miami is walking around, like on a tightrope and Indiana's all loose. That's, Cristobal has said something similar, that it's sort of, and I think Miami's maybe even had the advantage of they've been using their own facilities. They've obviously, like, I assume at some point they displaced to a hotel, but, like, they have not. A lot of this has remained familiar to them. I believe they are even getting to keep their home locker room on Monday night. I believe I heard that at Media Day Saturday, that you're going to use their home locker room rather than, presumably if Miami were not in this game, presumably Indiana would get the home locker room, unless there are multiple, because maybe the Indiana would get the Dolphins locker room. I don't know. The Dolphins certainly aren't using it right now.
Yeah, because they use auxiliary locker rooms for a lot of these.
But Miami apparently is going to keep its home digs. So the game itself, I mean, do you want to go ahead and do predictions and then kind of work backward on how we got to those, or?
I mean, it's up to you.
All right. Well, give me your prediction then.
I believe it was 38-17 Indiana. Each week we've kind of gotten a bigger spread to the game in Indiana's favor. Obviously there's been much has been made about they don't make mistakes. I think that plays into this. I don't know if we're selling Indiana short even at a 21-point deficit, just based on what we've seen, because I do think Oregon and Alabama and Ohio State all sort of have more talent. Obviously, Miami beat Ohio State, but had more talent. And Indiana sort of dispatched, the two most recent foes with ease. I don't know where Miami has an opening. And look, I know they can get to the quarterback, but Indiana can sort of, win that game if it comes down to it. But I don't think we've seen sort of, even when teams have gotten pressure on Mendoza of recent, it hasn't rattled him the way it did at the start of the year. He's a much different quarterback. And Curt Cignetti's talked about sort of his evolution, especially in the last, like, 6 to 8 weeks, in terms of, just having developed and taken to the system and learned everything. I think he's remarked since the Heisman, and Mike Shanahan did too, just about his growth. And so, I just don't see an opening for Miami, basically. And I think Indiana has shown throughout the season what kind of team it is, and I think we see it again, and they finish the job.
So Hoosier Dave asked quickly, what conference is the ref crew from? I believe it's the Big 12, if I'm not mistaken. I believe there's a Big 12 crew on this game. I had it closer. I had it 27 to 21 Indiana, and I do find this matchup interesting. I believe our friend Bill Connolly has this as like a 10 or 11 point spread in favor of Indiana. If you actually go over to cfbgraphs.com, and I've referenced this season, if you run this game on a neutral site, Indiana's a 56.5% win probability, basically 26 to 22 win. If you take it off neutral and you make Miami the home team, and I don't think it's necessarily going to feel like a Miami home game, but if you do that, it becomes much more of a coin toss. Indiana wins 26-24.
Right, but like what? So, but to backtrack, I mean, what was the Alabama spread? Like less than 10 points, wasn't it?
No, the Alabama spread on CFP graphs, it was 10 points. It was
Okay,
not. It was like 9.8 or something. I don't remember what Bill Connolly had it at.
They got curb stomped, and then Oregon was the spread was 4.5, and I mean they won by what? 30?
Yeah, no question. I don't know. What I'm presenting is the idea that like here's the thing: if a computer in a game like this, if a computer model is saying like it's going to be a 10 or 11 point difference, like that's the closest a computer model is going to come to saying it's going to be a blowout. Because a computer model looking at these two teams with varying levels of excellence and their talent and whatever else, is not going to be able to just factor in for the idea, well, Indiana's, steamrolling everyone, so surely they'll just do that again. A double-digit margin of victory in a national championship game in a computer projection is the closest a computer is going to get to a blowout. What's interesting to me is that it's Parker Fleming's website, Stats of War, on Twitter, CFB Graphs, sees it as closer. I don't know that I said 27 to 21 Indiana, like I said. I think Miami has a narrow but defined path to victory, and it's on both sides of the both sides of the line of scrimmage. I think the thing that is most disruptive to really any offense is in the modern game is a pass rush, and is in particular a pass rush that can get clean with 4. And this now, there's some questions about health and things like that, and that could obviously, factor in. Mario Cristobal has said everybody's healthy, everybody's fine. But if they are healthy or healthy enough, you go back and watch some of that Ohio State tape. I mean, they were Ruben Bain kind of leads the way, but Musador's in there. I think Moten is his name. The defensive tackle's in there. They can get pressure with 4. And then on the other side of the ball, I think Miami's offensive line, I don't think it's particularly mobile. It's very, very big. It's not one that's going to necessarily control the edges as well. Even against maybe, I know Mikael Kamara's been banged up and Daniel Ndukwe is young. But if you look at Miami, they take incredibly tight splits between their offensive linemen. And I think one of the 2 times, and it's, we're playing on really small sample sizes here. One of the 2 times I have seen this defense lose a game in the last 2 years, which is a pretty remarkable thing to say out loud. It has been because they could not win the battle at the line of scrimmage, and they could not get an opponent behind the chains. And I think, if Miami, it will need like a best effort kind of situation. But if Miami's offensive line can just kind of, with those tight splits and those big bodies, just join hands and lean downhill, and Mark Fletcher can keep that offense ahead of the chains, then I think you can create some opportunities for players like Malachi Toney. If you can't, Carson Beck's arm strength's not great. Obviously, he's been good in this playoff. He has a history of making some mistakes, but to his credit, he was a big part of obviously the win over Ole Miss. I don't think Miami's going to win. I see a defined path to victory for Miami, which makes it feel like a sort of classic favorite underdog scenario, if you understand what I'm saying, that like I think Indiana's going to win. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if Indiana wins in something of the manner of what you're talking about here. I can see, basically like one reasonable outcome based on the way Miami has played in this playoff, based on the personnel they have, and making admittedly some assumptions about how healthy they are and about a sloppier team out executing a sharper one, which doesn't happen often, but does happen in college football. I think Indiana wins, but I'm just picking it closer based on the fact that I think the margin might be a little tighter here than a lot of people are saying.
Yeah, I mean, to your point about mistakes, Miami averages 7 penalties a game. Indiana averages about half that. I think the turnover margin is not as ugly. Miami's turnover margin's decent, but obviously Indiana is plus 21 on the year. Miami only plus 11.
Miami had no penalties against Ohio State and then 10 penalties against Ole Miss. So like it is the duality.
Like if Miami has 10 penalties, like you can't see a way forward. And I mean, like they have to play a clean game, and I think Indiana still would have to make mistakes, a turnover or two, to kind of do what you're talking about.
But if the field's a little slick after a lot of rain today and your pass rush is coming for you, Indiana did put the ball on the ground twice in that Oregon game. They recovered both fumbles, but they did put the ball on the ground twice.
Yeah, but one was the game was over. I mean, they put that.
Sure, I'm just pointing out.
Like that's absurd. But I think like to your point, like teams. I mean, teams that have actually kind of stressed Indiana's defense have gotten those explosive plays and not kind of ground them to the halt because you aren't able to do that. Like Michigan State tried to do that, did it for 2 drives, like kept the ball, tried to run on them, tried to kind of get these plays, and then obviously things fall apart. They're behind. They can't do that anymore. And so, like to me, the key of the game actually is very simple. Like if Miami can score and take a 2-possession lead early, that flips the script, and that makes this as a different game because Indiana hasn't seen it, and Indiana playing with the lead has proven to be deadly for opposing teams. Like the only way to like what you're talking about happens, like Indiana gets up 7-0 even, like it's just we've seen that story all the time, right? And then Indiana's the aggressor. Indiana's just in control, and
especially because this isn't like it's not necessarily an overly explosive Miami offense. Like what has worked for them in these playoff games, Ole Miss a little bit less so, but certainly A&M and Ohio State has been the ability to just stay ahead of the chains, stay on the field, run behind Mark Fletcher, not put too much on Carson Beck. If you get to a place where you're down 10, 14 points and you feel like you've got to start accelerating your offense and throwing the ball more, like I think if you're Miami, you're in real trouble then. Because again, I'm not sure that this offensive line group is going to be as good pass blocking as it is run blocking. So I think to your point, if Indiana gets out ahead early, I think it's yeah.
And Indiana has 30 more explosive plays of 20-plus yards or more. I mean, obviously, that's where they've kind of lived. And so, like, I just think the opening moments of this game, the opening quarter of this game will tell the tale. Like, I do think Miami has to get a hot start, to sort of redefine kind of what this is about. And so I think that's sort of the key to me, to sort of see what happens in that first quarter. I mean, pick 6, that's obviously the greatest start Indiana could have had in the last one. You don't need that, but just with the lead, like Indiana obviously likes to defer, but when they've lost the coin toss, I think more than they've won the season. They've won the coin toss and played on defense. What am I saying? I'm getting myself tripped up. They like to defer.
You're really struggling.
Yes, but they like to defer.
It's been like it is. There's not been one obvious trend of them getting the ball or playing
start on defense or offense. Basically, is what I was trying to say.
Yeah, it's good. I'm glad we got there. We got there in the end.
Got there.
I just like it. I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. Like all the evidence in your eyes says Indiana should win this game. There are just a handful of things that Miami does well that are awfully disruptive to a game plan. If you can stay on the field, you can wear out a defense, you can lengthen drives and shorten games, and then you can do what Michigan State couldn't do in that game, Wisconsin the same, which is really disrupt Indiana's offense on the other side. Like you know, if I was in Kurt Cignetti's shoes and I was offered, you know, one guarantee for Monday night's game, like just you know, I'm standing in front of you right now and I can make you one promise about what will happen in Monday night's game. The one I would be asking for is that my offensive line played well and controlled that pass rush. Because that is like the chaos agent, I think, in all of this for Miami. Like Malachi Toney is unbelievably talented. You know, he is probably as good as any individual player Indiana has faced this season. Like, he's unbelievable. And if we turn this into a game where Malachi Toney gets some of those game-breaking moments, explosives, catch and run, you know, ball in space kind of stuff, then yes, that makes a difference. But I think the thing
to a point, but just who, like, I mean, there have been explosive plays, but none of them have been that really, other than those like 2 ODU runs where they were just plus. Like, who has broken a run like that on the side, you know, on like a short screen? Like, I mean, can you think of a play that's happened against Indiana? Even, I mean, in the last 2 years?
I mean, only the coverage busts.
Those are not like having somebody boxed up and then they're breaking tackles and getting free.
I mean, the only thing I'm warning you is that, like, Malachi Toney is an athlete at a level Indiana individually I would argue has not seen this season. Like, other than Jeremiah Smith, who had a couple of those moments in the
Jeremiah Smith's a pretty good player, right?
So is Malachi Toney.
But I'm saying, like you know, he did a little bit of damage, but they still won the game. Like,
no doubt. But my point is, it's, you know, it's not Malachi Toney that I would be most worried about. That pass rush is the change agent. If Miami wins this game, it is because that pass rush set the terms and then controlled the game. And if Indiana can control that pass rush, and people have been talking in the comments about, you know, the importance of the run game and all of that, of course, if Indiana can control that pass rush, even to the tune of like a couple of sacks, right? No lost fumbles, that kind of thing. Like, you can give up a sack or two. Ruben Bain's really good. But if Indiana can with some tangible results neutralize that pass rush, I don't see how Miami has enough else in its bag to win this game. But that pass rush is good enough to disrupt the whole thing, to just completely discombobulate a game plan. And at very least, and listen, Indiana can still win the game. We saw them beat Ohio State 13-10, right? But at very least, put you in a situation like what Texas A&M got into. I think they sacked Marcel Reed 6 times in that game. You know, put you into a situation where it's 10-10 with 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, like that kind of thing. And then it's like, it's a coin toss for whose game it is. It's who makes the play. And all season, Iowa, Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State, it's been Indiana. But you'd have to do it one more time. Whereas if that pass rush can be contained to a meaningful extent, and you can run the ball effectively, you can set up those one-on-ones for Fernando Mendoza, because Miami does have some, I think, much more legitimate concerns in the secondary. One of their safeties is out for the first half because of a targeting injection. I think they have 2 corners, I believe, that are both probably going to try and play through injuries in this game. You get some one-on-ones for Omar Cooper, for Charlie Becker, for Elijah Surratt, with a clean pocket for Fernando Mendoza. And I think we are talking about I'm not going to say 56-22, but I think we are talking about a game where Miami starts feeling like it's got to chase early. And then I think Miami gets in trouble because it can't lean on the thing that it does best offensively, which is run the ball to set up the pass. And so, like, everything to me starts, and if Miami cannot get pressure home, ends with that pass rush.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I to me, the run game question is interesting because Miami's rushing offense, I mean, statistically, is fairly average. You know, it's not been sort of this powerhouse. I mean, they had the big game against Texas A&M, averaged over 6 yards a carry. That was only the second time they did it all season. The only other time they did it was against Bethune-Cookman. I mean, they've been held under 100 yards 3 times this season. And you know, if they have to be one-dimensional, like, that's where Indiana, I mean, you haven't mentioned kind of Indiana's defense other than to say, you know, you're kind of worried about them getting home. When they make teams one-dimensional, regardless of what the front four does, it becomes a long day for opposing offenses.
It's a big game for those linebackers because, like, I think there's going to be moments where those guys have to take on blocks from much bigger linemen. Because listen, like, I think you're right about Miami's run game. Miami's also 18th in the country in third down conversion rate. So like they are consistently putting themselves in good positions on third downs, which they tend to do not necessarily with explosive running, but productive running. And that goes back to that idea of an offensive line that just plays tight splits. You can't get between them. You can't stunt through them. And then they just lean into people. And I think if you can put Miami into second and long, certainly into third and long, like I don't think that offense is – Tony will make some plays, right? But I don't think that offense is built to do that again and again and again. It's if they can do what Notre Dame did last year with Riley Leonard, where they're just constantly leaning forward and leaning forward and leaning forward. That's where I think Miami could get Indiana in some trouble defensively.
Yeah, but like I said, I think that just because they can't get pressure up the middle doesn't mean they won't get pressure. I think they found creative ways that blitzed and used those linebackers, like you said, very effectively to sort of move them around and not know where they're coming from. And so, it'll be interesting. And obviously, much has been made kind of the connections with the coaching staff. Obviously, Corey Heatherman used to be the defensive coordinator at James Madison, worked over Brian Haynes. Haynes succeeded him. They're very close. And obviously he went up against Mike Shanahan, for a couple of years when he was named play caller. So that adds another extra wrinkle. And, Kurt Cignetti talked about his deep respect for Heatherman and sort of the way his defenses play violent and aggressive. And so obviously that sort of adds another piece to it, to your point, especially up kind of in the trenches, those battles. I mean, I think that's what it sounds like they're prepared for, and that they know this kind of one of the keys to the game as well, based on kind of what everybody's talked about this week.
It does also and I think we both, try not to play into like conference specific tropes. But it is worth saying, like, this is probably an area where playing a Big Ten schedule does Indiana some good. Like they have seen teams that try to do what Miami's going to try and do offensively. Like, and not that there aren't any teams like that in the ACC, but you're also going to see some teams in the ACC that try to gimmick things up a little bit. That don't necessarily have the athletes or the size.
Well, I mean, I guess the comparison would be like Miami probably wants to turn this game into the Iowa game. And like that's,
I think it probably wants to turn this game into the game it played against Ohio State, frankly, in the college.
Well, I mean, I think they were very similar, but like, yeah, I mean, like but Indiana has played those games and come out on top.
Right, exactly. And Indiana has seen a lot of teams that have tried to be more physical with Indiana, and Indiana's kind of met that challenge, pretty consistently. From a health perspective, Indiana certainly, there kind of remain these lingering questions about Brendan Franke. I think at this point, like, if we see him out there, we'll know. Otherwise, I just would assume he's not. He was, kind of around this week. It's not like he was like limping around in a boot or something. But it's. You would imagine at this point that's Quinn Warren's job probably through the end of the year, unless something
it's questionable. Why do you even risk it? Like a
right.
bad kickoff is something like we talk about, like a mistake that you can't, like, and he gets hurt and something happens, and there's no reason to push him back in a moment like this if it's anywhere close to like 50 or 64. Like you have to have 100% confidence, and they haven't obviously the last 2 weeks, because I think he's been listed at some point in the week before each of those last two playoff games, and then not played. So
right, yeah. And again, he's been around. He hasn't been on like a scooter or something or on crutches, like
No, but he wasn't like that the last couple weeks either. And it looked
and he still didn't play. Mikhail Kamara seems available at this point. Omar Cooper certainly. I mean, it just in general, it seems like Indiana is about as healthy as it can be. There's obviously going to be a question of who lines up at right tackle. We'll find that out at game time, but that's, I think, going to be a schematic decision more than anything else. The one other thing that I thought, maybe in part because they all caught a touchdown pass in the game, I believe they all did, unless Omar Cooper didn't, and I'm forgetting, that did bring into stark relief as the sun begins to come out behind me. The rain seems to have been clearing. It seems to have cleared finally. Was the
Omar did. Wasn't it like all the touchdowns went to somebody different too?
I think so. Yeah.
Omar did get the touchdown though, just to
the strength of like the luxury that having four really good wide receivers, basically, like that any one of them, if Fernando Mendoza finds them in a one-on-one matchup, they will be able to exploit it. And some of those are more pronounced than others. You had Elijah Surratt, I think, had a couple of really good contested catches in that game. I think Indiana was 5 of 5 on contested catches in general. There was, of course, the Charlie Becker touchdown pass in the end zone that I think kind of made the rounds for just the way Mendoza diagnosed it pre and post snap. But then there was even like the E.J. Williams touchdown.
Becker doesn't get any credit for falling backwards and leaping up to get that grab. That was what was most impressive. Him diagnosing.
Well, no, it's basically kind of like come on. Will you stop interrupting? You do this all the time. Where it's like explain yourself, and then
he's falling back.
That was the play that seemed to kind of make the rounds after the game in terms of like the analysis piece of like, identify the one-on-one coverage, pin the safety to the other side with the eyes, and then it's a great throw. And like it wasn't even bad coverage, right? Like I mean, it wasn't pass interference. It was good coverage. Becker just makes a great catch contested. But then there's even like the E.J. Williams, where E.J. Williams finds himself in single coverage, and Fernando Mendoza immediately knows he will get open. I think when there's not a place on the field that you don't like in a team that is obviously an offense that generally runs the ball well, but I think it's fair to say like its greatest success comes through the pass game. Like I don't think that's unfair to say.
It's really more dangerous in the pass game. Maybe they've had great success rushing it. It's not maybe as consistent, but their highs, the highest highs of this offense are what you're talking about. To
right.
The receivers. Yeah.
When on a given snap, there is no one on the field that you don't feel like as a defense, you've got to be at your best to win that matchup or they could really hurt you. That's just like when you couple that to a quarterback that's seeing everything, processing everything, and playing as well as Fernando Mendoza is, that is just so exceptionally difficult to defend. And I think, at the beginning of this season, we felt like Indiana had 2 of those receivers, right? We felt like they had Omar Cooper, they had Elijah Surratt, and that was a really big advantage. And it was sort of like, that might be the best receiver tandem outside of Columbus in the conference. And, they're different players. Surratt is a great possession receiver, really precise with his routes, great hands. Cooper's a little bit more over the top and explosive. As the season's gone on, like E.J. Williams has had some nice games. Charlie Becker, of course, has emerged as, probably one of Mendoza's preferred weapons. You even can kind of tuck in Riley Nowakowski there, who just kind of seems to come up with, 2 or 3 productive catches every single game, in addition to a ton of help in the run game. My point is, I don't, especially in a secondary that's got some personnel concerns, for the first 30 minutes of this game, maybe all 60 minutes of this game in some spots. I just don't think you can paper over all of that. In soccer, there is a sort of an adage that you call like a defensive shape, like a blanket. And you have to recognize that the blanket on a cold night can't cover everything. And you have to accept that like maybe your head will be uncovered or your arms will be uncovered or whatever. I don't know how you can throw the blanket over this pass game without that pressure, without that pass rush. I don't know how you can throw the blanket over this pass game and not leave something uncovered.
Well, basically. To your point, I've actually talked to I think Shanahan and Chandler Whitmer about this very topic, because Becker, they kind of view it as Becker's emergence has put just added stress on teams, because it now has been kind of a lot. He's getting a lot of playing time, aside Omar and Elijah. In a way, EJ has been solid, and I don't think there's any question, and he can have those breakout moments because obviously got the NFL size. But like what Becker has brought, that element, another element of being a guy that can get over the top and just kind of, he's just like, what is he averaging? It's got, I think if he qualified, let me look this up real quick.
He was at one point averaging the exact same. It was before the Peach Bowl. He was averaging 21.2 yards per reception, and I remember that because that's how many Omar Cooper averaged last year.
So he's averaging 20.5, and he has 30 receptions. 10 of those are for 25 plus yards. Yeah. And so, that is sort of I'm trying to look up who led there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, he's now I guess he qualified in CFB stats. He's one of only 6 players in the country that's averaging over 20 yards per reception. And so like what Shanahan and Whitmer have talked about is like, that's put just so much stress. Cause like, you got to try to stop Indiana's run game because we know what happens when they get going. You got to try to stop all these other receivers, whatever combination of 3 or 4 on the field, EJ included. Like, how do you do that? Where do you pick your poison? And so, like Becker's sort of just ability to get downfield, like he has been consistently with Omar on his side who can do the same, and Elijah, maybe not as with quickness or speed necessarily, but just kind of be able to muscle those catches. Like, it's just very hard to stop it's just very challenging. And then you throw a quarterback that's not going to make mistakes and can diagnose the defense very quickly, look you off the coverage. I mean, it's a hard thing to do. And so, to your point, like, it's an added element that they've had for the last 6 weeks that, they all kind of said they saw it coming in terms like Becker was ready. They just didn't know if they'd have a place for him. And, the injuries sort of opened it up, and then they sort of reshuffled things and said, like, we just can't keep this kid off the field, essentially. And so I think it's really, we've talked about it, I think certainly, but it is a story that maybe hasn't been covered enough just because of how, those numbers are just incredibly impactful, and how they changed the game is even bigger.
I wonder too, if this is a game where Indiana can call back to get to speak on that pass rush for a second, where Indiana can call back to some of what Fernando Mendoza had to do well at Cal, which is build stuff that unfolds quickly. And I think he's throwing the ball right now, sideline to sideline, as well as he has all year. Like, basically any coach that I talked to him about the last 2 weeks has been referencing his opposite hash throws and how, just like Charlie Becker had one. I think Elijah Surratt or Omar Cooper might have had one against Oregon, which are basically just like quick outs, right? But the idea is you run them to the wide side of the field. Most quarterbacks don't have the arm strength to get them from one hash across the other hash to the other sideline before a defensive back jumps underneath a route, if you understand what I'm saying. He has that. And if you saw a little bit of that on his Cal tape, and of course at Cal it was admittedly, kind of a necessity. Like, it was something that was required.
Well, you have to survive. When you get sacked 40 times, you're on the run.
But you can maybe pull back some of that in a game like this and say, we are going to build some of those quick timing routes and that back off a pass rush that make that a little bit like pass to run, that make a defense push back a little bit. And then either A, that opens up the run game against a defensive line that is certainly more rush coded than it is run coded, or B, it puts you in a situation where maybe you can take some of those deep shots.
Well, that's not to mention his scrambling ability, which all the coaches he's faced in the last couple of weeks, and Caden Womack in particular talked about this, like his scrambling ability, and the when he's sort of refined, because I think sometimes he made more mistakes when to run earlier this season, picked some bad spots, that what he's done the last couple of weeks with that has just crushed opposing. The Oregon game, he had like 3 first downs. Alabama, he did the same thing. And like, that has a way too of breaking what you're talking about. Like, you want to rush the passer, he goes for 25 yards and gets down the sideline. You're going to think twice. And so that's another element. And that's, like I said, when you've seen kind of consistent improvement from him, as what the coaches have kind of told us, like, he's picking his spots better. With the exception of maybe some of the late runs against Oregon when the game was in hand and they just wanted to be healthy. Like, do not do that.
That was how I got that quote out of Reuben Bain. I asked him about like his feel, like for sliding away from pressure and his toughness, kind of running the ball. And that was when Reuben Bain said yesterday he understands. It was part of a wider like answer, but he said he understands. He's from Miami. He's got the same blood I've got. So
that blood, the scrambling, but it could impact like what you're talking about in terms of the Miami sort of trying to tee off and being reluctant to sort of go all in, because if you get, 2 explosive plays like that, it's another thing that just sort of changes. And we've seen it. Like, we've seen it the last the 2 games. Really, Ohio State did a nice job of bottling them up. But in terms of these the playoff games, his 360 was not good. But it needs you need to stop him scrambling, and it's hard to do when you're trying to rush and he gets loose, and he's picked his spots and done a really nice job.
I guess the last thing, just to wrap up here, is just the perspective on this. I've lent mine a lot in terms of the historical, as we've gone on through here, the historical sort of perspective of this program. But I'm just curious for yours. Essentially, just you've been around a lot of football teams. You've been around a lot of college football, some pro football, some NFL teams. What it's been like to watch and to chronicle, sort of this season unfolding and this team unfolding. Basically, that we talk about like the different evolutions of Fernando Mendoza, of Charlie Becker, whatever else. I'll give you the stage here in a second. Then I have to go get some tissues because my nose is just absolutely flushing. But just from your perspective, basically what it's been like, even independent of the context of Indiana football and what it was and what it's become, just what it's been like. We both thought this team would be good. Neither of us thought this team would be this good. What it's been like to watch this team kind of evolve and this season unfold.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and I think the historical comparisons sort of have bubbled up. I mean, I know Omar Cooper got a junior, for anybody that didn't see it, got asked if this team would beat the LSU team from 2019, obviously Joe Burrow and company, and he said that they would. I think if Indiana were to win, I think those conversations will sort of take off in terms of like what's Indiana's place in sort of the pantheon of college football. In terms of what they've accomplished, I certainly think it belongs up there. Watching it all unfold, I don't have as much sort of perspective as Zach does in terms of watching Indiana and what they've kind of accomplished. Obviously, from having kind of been, really bad for a very extended period of time to what this is now. But I mean, I'm just amazed, and I think it's. Curt Cignetti just keeps getting these same questions over and over because I think that's what people want to know. It's like, how did you do this? Because there's no sort of precedent for this. There's no sort of comparison to what he's done in the short turnaround time. And I know he's sort of said that this wouldn't have been possible in the non-portal area. We wouldn't have been able to do that. But what he's still accomplished to evaluate the talent the way he did, to get quarterbacks to excel right off the way in the transfer portal, where you're bringing all this new talent. You've seen very few programs sort of break out in the path. I mean, you've seen them have success, and you've seen sort of, Vanderbilt, obviously, sort of parallel kind of story, but nothing to this height and nothing to this like 2-year span. I mean, if they win tomorrow, it's tomorrow, right? They will have the most wins in FBS over the last 2 years. Over, I think they're tied right now with Ohio State and Oregon. They'll have the best record. They'll have the longest home winning streak. So it's not just success. It's like, well,
and even more than that, they'll have the reigning Heisman Trophy winner. They'll have the reigning Coach of the Year. I think we can all probably put the cart before the horse. They'll probably have the Broyles Award for top assistant. Like they will have a clean sweep of all of. Yeah,
Mendoza won all the offensive player of the year awards. They had all these All-Americans, more All-Americans than they ever had. They'll have more draft picks than they ever had. And I think the one thing that will probably detract from like their place in the great teams of history is that they probably don't have as many pros, like future Hall. Like when you talk about was 01 Miami team. Like, I mean,
comparing anyone to 01 Miami is.
I'm saying, like that's why
compare them to 2019 LSU, which is I think the last team that felt like it did this, like the last team that just
right. And I mentioned that Omar Cooper would have,
like it's
like about that. Like those are teams that just had something.
All pros at a number of different positions.
And Mendoza could be that, and they could have one other or two other guys, but like I don't know that they have that collection of talent that sort of went on to did what they did, and I think that sort of frames the discussion. But in terms of like what Cignetti has done. There is no comparison, and I think it will go down as sort of and that's not to track what the players have done, but I think what the staff has done, what Cignetti's done, and I think they're together in this is the greatest sort of turnaround in college sports history or any kind of sports history, and just to sort of sustain success over 2 years is just in terms of the level they had, it's just incredible.
I think the thing that strikes me is that Indiana was obviously the unlikely candidate for this. But I think if you're trying to get at like what people are asking Curt Cignetti, I think part of what they're asking him is obviously how did you do this in Indiana? But I think the other part of what they're asking is how did you do this in this era? Because this is what wasn't supposed to be possible. Like this is what the portal and NIL was supposed to break up, was the idea that you could build a team that was just so like that just never lost anything. And
but isn't it,
they haven't necessarily like obviously
because like it was supposed to sort of equal the playing field where you could leap up but not necessarily.
You weren't supposed to be able to be
heights,
15, right? 16 and 0. And with the idea, and listen, it's not like Indiana's depth has been tested all over the place, but like the edge is a good example. They've lost really their two most productive edges this year. And the guy they plugged in that was essentially their number 3 at the beginning of the season, it's not quite that simple, but in a sense, had like a sack and 2 forced fumbles against Oregon. Like 2
sacks, a forced fumble, and a block kick.
Yeah. So like it's just like you were like what you weren't supposed to be able to do was achieve the level of perfection that we used to require in college football at a time when it was easier for big programs to amass talent and to just sort of constantly be assembly lining that talent out the door to the NFL and the next one up, and just, the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Ohio States, Southern Cal for many, many years under Pete Carroll, and so forth. And Indiana is not exactly that. Like, I don't think Indiana's got, I don't think Indiana is peak era Nick Saban, where like they'll send 5 guys to the NFL this year and the 5 guys that replace them will all just be boom, all Americans, no problem. Certainly not from the perspective of those all, typically those guys were all high 4 stars and 5 stars when they got to Alabama, and then they waited and all that. But what you weren't supposed to be able to do was create a team that was deep enough, that was sound enough to achieve this level of perfection. That the parity that has allowed Indiana to rise was also supposed to mean nobody ever got quite this high. And I think there have been these 2 concurrent questions. One is, how'd you do this at Indiana? But the other is, how did you do this so quickly at a time when this wasn't supposed to be possible? And the reason we all said that is because we watched as schools with more tradition and, more sort of like more stability, in the sense that Curt Cignetti had to go through a coaching change and a roster flip. Like Georgia hasn't had to do that in the last 5 years. I don't know who else. Like Oregon hasn't. Like Dan Lanning's been there for 4 years. Ohio State, etc. And until recently, anyway, teams with more money were not able to do this. Why have you been able to do it? And I thought it was amusing when someone asked Curt Cignetti, like, will you invite people to visit you in Bloomington in the spring to learn how you've done it? And he basically said, no. He was just like, I will be in my office watching film. I don't particularly care to entertain.
Isn't that the secret, right? Isn't that part of it? Like, that right there, the answer is, and it is unique to sort of his sort of worldview in terms of like how he does things and approaches things. And so, it's hard work's part of it, and his film study habits are part of it. But like, yeah, but I think it was interesting yesterday, and I don't think you got a chance to go back. Like he was, they had the media day and he spoke for an hour, so they released transcripts. I was kind of bouncing around the room, but I went back to what he said, and he even said not just, he had talked about before that this wouldn't be possible without the transfer portal, obviously, but he said now this might not be possible. Even if the same thing happens, he takes the job today, he's coming from James Madison. He doesn't think that it would necessarily be possible. He didn't use himself as an example, but because now the talent level at the group of 5 is now getting so diluted because it's getting rated every year, that even now coaches like him that are coming over probably aren't pulling from the guys. And he said like the James Madison base of players he drew from, and those guys, dozen or so, and this year and last have been a key part of that success and how they've gotten rolling. And other group of 5 guys were as well last year too. Old Dominion obviously played a factor in their secondary, but like that's not even necessarily the way it would work for a guy that's doing it now, right? Because like those, that's following his same path. So it's just it might have been the perfect moment for it, and it might not be something we ever see again.
This is a Durham Bulls hat, just so everyone's aware. I've seen some Broncos chat in the side chat here. This is a Durham Bulls hat. Don't think you will only hurt the ball club. He's Mike Niziolek. I'm Zach Osterman. Thank you all so much. We will certainly effort to do one of these. We didn't get one after the Peach Bowl. We'll see. We will find time to do one after the game. It might be Tuesday morning after potentially if Indiana wins the Champions press conference, or if Indiana loses, just at some point Tuesday morning, we're both flying back. But those are very late nights, and we still have some deadlines for a game like this to get certain things in. But thank you all so much for joining us. It has been, genuinely lovely to sort of build this community, and to see so many, familiar faces in the chat every week, and to create some running jokes that I know Mike and I have encountered with fans along the way. No, I will not be picking Mike up from Miami. In this case, it's because I don't have a car, but I still wouldn't do it out of principle. But Mike, any last words before the last game, what we know will be the last game of the season?
No, it's been fun. Like you said, I mean, we've seen people out at every stop. We've Miami, California, Atlanta. People have come up to us and kind of greeted us and had fun. And so we're glad you're kind of enjoying it. We're glad you kind of been reading along with all the coverage, because it would suck to write it in a vacuum. But we really appreciate everybody, whether you've listened to the podcast, follow us on social media, or read the stuff. We're really appreciative of it.
He's Mike Niziolek. I'm Zach Osterman. This has been the last Mind Your Banners before the last game of the 2025-2026 college football season. Indiana-Miami in Miami Gardens, Hard Rock Stadium, Monday night kickoff. I think technically set for 7:30. I think 7:50 is when it's actually going to. We're actually expecting to see toe meet leather. Indiana 15-0, number 1 in the country, attempting to defeat number 10 Miami and win its first ever national championship in football.
No alternate predictions if there's weather involved?
No alternate predictions. Iguanas, raining iguanas. Iguanas falling
from hit by an iguana, your prediction changes by 10 points.
I didn't click that button on CFB stats. Or CFB graphs. I'll see what the iguana metric is. Maybe we'll do an emergency podcast in the morning.
That'd be good.
Thank you all so much for joining us. This has been Mind Your Banners for January 28th, 2026. We will talk to you soon.